Hello and welcome to another Warcraft 3 audio commentary. This is going to be my first impressions on a replay that Jake sent me versus a quote-unquote good elf. So, starting out pretty good. The guy's got busting over 200 APM, though the game just started, so we'll see if that sort of stays the case. And it looks like he's dropping back down to... oh, he's back up to 200, so... But yeah, it looks like he's doing a bit of spamming, warm-up, whatever you want to call it. And Jake is going to be undead in this replay. He's going for a ghoul build with a Dreadlord. I've been singing the Dreadlord's praises of late. One of the last few patches he got buffed quite a bit, so that makes him more viable. He's a fun hero. There are some weaknesses, of course. But yeah, I feel like he could be viable in a lot of different situations. But maybe at the highest levels, he's just a little bit too exploitable. I'm not sure. But at any rate, Jake's opponent's going to be going for a Warden Ancient of War creep on a mercenary camp. This is a fairly aggressive sort of strategy, though Jake might be able to punish this guy for doing this. We'll see how well he executes this. Jake brought a ghoul up here, so this is a pretty good start, but he's going to... oh, he doesn't get hit. Oh, he does get hit by the Ancient of War. Wow, I don't think he should have lured the creeps. I think he should have just, like, maybe roamed around. I guess he could have got Shadow Strike on the ghoul. So, he loses a ghoul for basically no... not much damage at all. He actually lost it to either the Ancient of War or the Creep, so the Warden did not get any experience from that ghoul kill, but it did cost Jake his ghoul here. So the elf sort of smartly is able to do the trick where he gets he positions the archer near the Wisp and the Ancient of War, which triggers the Creep AI to cast a lightning shield on the archer, allowing him to sort of direct 20 damage a second to the creeps. But you have to be careful not to kill the creeps with that lightning shield because it will deny you experience. Jake manages to steal the Potion of Invulnerability, and he's got 113 experience. I'm not 100% sure what all he killed. It looks like he probably got an archer there, maybe a wisp. The elf picks up the Troll Shadow Priest. The Warden does get level 2, but she does miss out on that greater invulnerability potion. I say greater, I think it's like a few more seconds than the normal one that you can buy at the shop. And yeah, the elf is sort of walled his base. I'm not sure if there's an opening here. It looks like there's an opening here though, so I guess semi-walled off his main base. He's got a wisp to scout towards the top right expansion, which it looks like Jake was pulling ghouls. I assume Blue saw the ghouls on the way there. I don't know if he's got Shadow Strike or Phantom Knives. The bad news for Blue in this scenario, we'll see if he's... oh, it looks like Jake might do a Tower Rush. He's got a Sacrificial Skull. He has the choice in this situation of trying to just expand or Tower Rushing the elf. There are pros and cons to each one. If you Tower Rush, the elf basically has all of his tools available to fight you off. With these wisps, he can detonate your hero, your skeletons, the blight. He can build Ancients of War. If you're over here expanding, it's going to be much harder for your opponent to pressure the Expo. Of course, it does lend itself to a longer-term game plan, but that's probably fine, honestly. But Jake just goes in for the kill here. He decides just to go for the Tower Rush immediately, not giving the elf time to do any more fancy Ancient of War creeping or whatever. And this is a lot of ghouls for the blue elf to deal with it. I like this playstyle, and I do. I always am tempted to try to, when the elves do this aggressive Ancient of War creeping, I'm always tempted to just try to find some way to punish them for it. It's just very difficult when they execute it really well to do it. But this is a really good timing. The fact that Jake was able to, get some of those kills, he was able to pick up the Potion of Greater Invulnerability, and archers. Again, archers very weak against ghouls, and since he's level 2, Vampiric Aura going to be very powerful here. The skeletons, he didn't get off a detonate on the blight, was probably not expecting it. The creeps end up getting, I don't know who woke up the creeps, aggroed them into this Ancient of War, but these creeps are adding to the DPS that the elf is having to fend off. And all of this is adding up to free time for the towers to get completed. I don't know if uprooting the Tree of Life and moving him close to these towers would have made a difference, but not killing these acolytes is put the elf in a terrible position. The fact that these creeps are able to kill, seemingly they're going to kill, or they did a lot of damage as an Ancient of War, so it's going to be a little bit in danger. Just imagine that this was like full hit points and it was maybe closer to this base. And it would be, in this scenario, it would be a very powerful weapon. Again, Jake having this item, pretty big deal. It gets him a little bit of free healing. It gets him a kill there on the archer, and the towers are up. In the meantime, though, Jake doesn't have any ghouls left, and he almost ran by this Ancient of War and took a free shot, which would have been bad. But, yeah, Jake is doing a little bit of trash talk. The Warden, not super effective against towers. He can probably snipe these acolytes with Shadow Strike. Is that level 1 Shadow Strike? I'm not entirely sure if he had Phantom Knives level 2 or what the deal is here. But yeah, the elf is going to struggle to get these towers taken out. Let me take a look at his. Yeah, he's low on resources, so it's not like he really could have afforded to build a bunch of Ancients of War here and defend this. So this was really well timed out by Jake, and the positioning in the elf's base, again, wide open for these towers. If his base was a little bit more compact, it would have been tougher to get these ziggurats. Wow, that's shocking. He got the, is it level 2 Karen Swarm? Wow, level 2 Karen Swarm got the kill there, smooth. So, so yeah, this was set up good positions to put these ziggurats. Again, the elf was not able to do enough DPS to cancel those. Even if he does cancel them, though, all these ghouls would have he would have had to spend time attacking them, which means the ghouls would have gotten free shots, which, again, ghouls versus archers tend to favor the ghouls. It's like the elf wants to try to counterattack now, but, again, that's, again, a bit silly. Jake, most likely, let's see, did he sell his town portal, or did he use his town portal? Where on earth is his hero? Okay, there he is. I don't know. Yeah, he probably did sell his town portal. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I want to say when I looked at his inventory, I don't remember seeing a town portal. So that makes sense for this type of strategy. You know, you're going all in. Notice Jake hasn't teched, so he saves resources that way, and it's really an all in. If he fails on this push, the elf is probably set up in too good of a position, having teched and having, you know, probably leveled and stuff. But so yeah, Jake sort of runs into this creep camp, and he's like, well, wow, I don't really think I have enough to fight this. He didn't pick up a town portal, though, either, so he's just going to run. Maybe he didn't have the resources to, or, God, it's really frustrating that they effed up the sort of user interface there to change to players. Like, it's inconsistent. You have to, like, spam click it and hope for some reason it randomly doesn't work, and then it randomly does work. So the Warden's taking a lot of damage. One Karen Swarm should clean this up very nicely. That one forward Spear Tower is putting in some work. Not amazing against archers. Archers, of course, are very, very weak against that, though, as well. So fortified armor. Busts the Warden, hits the Karen Swarm, and the elf's going to say GG new. You know, I don't know if he wants to try to say that was a noob win because of what he would probably call a cheese strategy, but the fact of the matter is Jake sort of realized where the vulnerability in the elf strategy was, and he punished him for it, starting right at the start, you know, harassing the Ancient of War creep. If Jake doesn't harass that, it's very easy for the elf. Well, I say very easy. It can be quite manageable for the elf to do that camp with just a single archer and a single level 1 hero, which is, you know, not a lot of races have the ability to do that very efficiently. Like they, you know, it's, I guess it does take the elf, you know, uprooting an Ancient of War, building an Ancient of War in a certain vulnerable location, knowing about like how to use the lightning shield trick and all that stuff. So, but yeah, once you've like sort of mastered that, so to speak, it's not very hard to do that camp, and it does offer you, like assuming he actually picks the item up if he's unharassed, he would have had a really good item, really high level. It probably would have gotten him maybe to level 2.5 or 2.25 or something like that. So it really sets the elf up really well going forward. After doing that camp, he can grab, a Troll Shadow Priest, and then he can grab a Troll Berserker if he wants to, and it allows him to make up for the lost sort of build time for the Ancient of War. So, the synergy is very good. But yeah, Jake sort of, did a decent job harassing it, and then he had this sort of presence of mind to, if he sold his town portal, if I'm indeed correct, he sold his town portal and sort of committed all in just about to a tower rush, bringing 2 acolytes, smart in case one gets sniped. You've got the second one if the towers get up, and you still have 2 acolytes. That's a lot of repairing capability. And again, if at any point the elf is able to snipe the acolyte, if he snipes both or all of your acolytes, you won't be able to repair or build more ziggurats, which is a potential problem, obviously. So making it harder, just having 2 acolytes right off the bat, is fairly important. Probably a very, you might say, a cautious move, but I think sort of necessary, because the critical part of being able to leverage a bunch of resources into that sort of rush is the ability to instantly build up a bunch of towers or ziggurats that you can upgrade into towers. If you cannot do that, then Jake is really just running in there with Blight and Ghouls, which again is more than manageable. You notice the elf was able to kill every single ghoul that Jake brought with him. The only problem the elf faced, like I said, was having enough DPS to do that while also stopping the ziggurats. It can be tough to do that for elf, and he was not able to do it. But if those ziggurats were not up, basically it would have been just a bunch of unit trading, and the elf would have been fine. And then there would have been no sort of second wind where the towers were doing a bunch of damage and still just in the base, like nearly impossible for the elf to deal with once they're up with just archers, really. I mean, if you get 4 towers up, especially if you have acolytes around and like a hero still poking around with, level, 1 or 2 Karen Swarm and stuff like that, ghouls coming on the back end, you just don't give the elf very much time to deal with that. And again, that it just sets up for the win, because if the elf just ignores those things, then, they're hitting the Tree of Life or the Tree of Ages, they're hitting the Moonwells, they're hitting any units or heroes that get into range, they might be sniping off wisps, and that's just, it's just too much for the elf to deal with. The elf cannot afford to rebuild all of his Moonwells, he can't really afford to lose his Tree of Ages, or just over and over again sacrifice archers trying to deal with that. It's just not going to work out. So the towers are just going to be too efficient. If you can't get like a ballista or 2 out, maybe a second hero, Panda or Tinker that could possibly throw some pressure at those towers, there's nothing you can really, really do there. And again, against a Warden, I don't know if the elf, if he has some other hero like a Keeper or a Demon Hunter, if it's quite as easy to pull that off. I think it's probably just as easy, honestly, but it really depends. You can get like Immolation with a Demon Hunter, you can get, Entangle and Trance with the Keeper, and Mana Burn, for the Demon Hunter as well. So yeah, it's an interesting sort of matchup, and I like that. I like Jake's decision to, I sort of like his decision to tower. On paper, he might have been okay to just go for the expansion, because I don't think the elf could have stopped him. And then he's just got the expansion up. It doesn't really take too long for the undead to build an expansion. Actually, I think they decreased the cost or the build time of the Haunted Gold Mine, which is pretty good. And then he just sets up for a later game, and he tries to just overwhelm with an economic advantage versus a timing attack. It would have left the elf a little bit of a sort of window where he could Ancient War creep his shot potentially and gotten close to or gotten to level 3, and then maybe level level 3, or sorry, level 2 Phantom Knives or Shadow Strike, maybe that's too annoying, and especially with Jake being at tier 1, maybe having to deal with Dryads or, whatever the elf decides to go, Hippogriff Riders, Bears, whatever he's able to throw out there, would have possibly been, a bit of a risk trying to do that with just tier 1, granted, but so yeah, it was probably a good decision to go for the tower. I mean, it worked, so it's just winning quicker potentially, and like I said, knowing the outcome, it's like, well, it's like always saying, what strategy would have been better or more consistent? Going for the late game, like I said, it does offer the elf time to leverage his tech, whereas the tower push, as it was executed, in under 10 minutes, the elf was not able to get any tier 2 going. He maybe could have snuck in a tier 2, a second hero in there, possibly. I don't know if the resources allowed him to do it. But yeah, that's, it's of course much different going into the mid and late game, trying to see what's going to work and what's not going to work. It's when you go for an expansion, it's investing for the future. So you don't know. It's the timing window shifts, and that's always a question mark. Is that going to work out for you? Obviously, if you can mine out the whole gold mine, and they don't get to mine out like an expansion, then yeah, you probably have a massive gold lead, and you can leverage that into just a bigger army and a win like that. If you don't think you can execute the tower rush properly, or if on the other hand the elf hadn't have fast tagged like he did, and instead he just had enough resources to pop out a bunch of Ancients of War or Ancient Protectors potentially, or something like that, that might have been a bit of a pickle for Jake, because then he would have probably already dropped the Blight, and then who knows what happens. But it's always a balancing, trying to decide, what you risk something going for the tower rush, but then you also, it's a risk to go for the expansion, and it's just a different kind of a game that's going to develop there. So but yeah, I thought this was a good game. Resource wise, let's see, Jake, they were like dead even. Obviously they had the same, nobody had an expansion. The elf actually mined a bunch more lumber, but it didn't really make any difference. I guess that's because Jake pulled a bunch of his ghouls for that rush, so that's pretty straightforward. You do need to make sure you have a bunch of lumber if you're going to do that, though, because you don't want to get a bunch of ziggurats up and then you can't tower for, even delaying it by like a minute or something would be probably terrible. So even like 30 seconds would risk getting your ziggurats destroyed. But so understanding the lumber and the timing is important. Again, if Jake's like a minute late on that push, a second hero might be there, some Ancients of Lore might be up or something like that. Who knows how it goes. Units killed, dead even, units produced very close. So the fact that this elf guy wanted to call Jake a noob, I'm sure some of that's just the fact that he lost and he was frustrated. But I mean, at the end of the day, though, it was seemingly well executed on Jake's part. It was more of a strategy. I don't know. I don't want to say that Jake didn't micro or macro good. Well, he seemingly did macro very well, and his timing was pretty much dead on, I guess, as far as I can tell. So yeah, I like those type of strategy wins. It wasn't just like, oh well, they played a 15-minute game and one guy, he just out microed the other player. It's not that I don't value micro and I can't appreciate certain micro tricks and a really cleanly played game. It's just that I do like to get those sort of strategy type wins. It's like, okay, I made a bunch of choices that really identified the opponent's weakness and sort of put the maximum amount of pressure on that weakness, and it worked out, and win the game in under 10 minutes. Sometimes it's difficult to do that. If for example, if Jake somehow lost his hero in the middle of that rush, he probably would have been in trouble, because he wouldn't have had, a couple more carrion swarms to throw at the elf. If he wanted to rebuild his hero, it would have been quite a long time, as it was level 3. It would have been a bunch of resources, and stuff like that. So, or the acolytes, if he loses those acolytes before he gets up like 4 ziggurats, obviously that can be a big problem. So there's a lot of sort of potential weak spots of this particular strategy. But if you can surprise your opponent, if they see it coming, the earlier they see it coming, the trickier it is to actually pull off, because there are things they can do like building more engines of war, getting ready for a detonate when you drop that sacrificial skull, making it a little bit harder to get, let's say, 3 or 4 ziggurats built. If you don't have enough blight on the ground, and you only build like 1 or 2 ziggurats, that is a much less of a threat, and it shifts the timing, again, getting any more ziggurats. And then if you cancel those ziggurats and then detonate again, where they were sort of built, then the blight goes away, then they can't follow up with more ziggurats there. So it's it is possible to fight back against this strategy. But again, if you surprise somebody with it, then they might not be aware, they need to detonate immediately, and then, they miss their opportunity, and there's 4 ziggurats going up in their base, and it's like, well, geez, what are they going to do, So I thought it was a really well-played game. The elf, to his credit, he seemed to be doing his creeping, sort of, ancient war creeping well. I don't know how exactly that shop camp got aggroed, if that was Jake aggroing and pulling the camp into the Ancient of War, or if the elf just messed up. But that actually put a lot of pressure on the elf as well, because those creeps, not that the Ancient of War went down to the creeps, but it took probably 500 damage or something like that, 600 damage, I don't know. But so that, in terms of using that Ancient of War as a weapon, sort of would have been a little bit harder. Yeah, so the elf was a decent enough player, it seemed. And it's just that Jake, Jake was, and again, the fact that Jake was able to snag the item was pretty big, as well. So if you wanted to sort of criticize the elf's play, letting Jake get that item was a big deal. Maybe not getting that ghoul kill was the ghoul died, the first ghoul that he scouted with, but the elf did not get the experience. So if he could have got that, it might have been good. Obviously, it would have been better. I don't know if it would have been that huge of a deal, but yeah, every little bit of experience can decide a game sometimes. So you want to get those experience, and again, a big item like the one Jake had. Who knows if Jake's hero survives, or if he can continue the pressure as much as he did without that invulnerability potion. Who knows? So I don't know how much damage he might have blocked with it. I wasn't paying really close attention. If he let Shadow Strike hit him and then he popped it, so he dodged a bunch of Shadow Strike damage, could have made a big difference there. But yeah, really like to see that. And the Dreadlord again, would the Death Knight have been as good or better? I'm not sure. I think Vampiric Aura is really pretty good. Carrion Swarm, not only can level 2 Carrion Swarm just do a lot of damage to archers and the Warden, but it can also one-shot wisps. So if there's a bunch of wisps lined up somewhere, Jake could sneak in there and pop those off. Yeah, but just the raw DPS of Carrion Swarm, along with Vampiric Aura, is assuming you have units, melee units like ghouls and skeletons, and of course your Dreadlord. I think it does a little bit better in a standing. Well, it's hard to say better, but if you're just standing in there and fighting somebody, and they're letting you hit their units with, they're letting your ghouls attack stuff and your hero attack stuff, and they're actually just standing in there and just trading blows. I think Vampiric Aura ends up healing you more, though obviously Unholy Aura is a movement speed aura first and foremost, and then the health regeneration is sort of a secondary effect. So it's not exactly fair to say, well, you regenerate more health from Vampiric Aura in a lot of circumstances than you do for Unholy Aura. Because like I said, the Unholy Aura is the main, sort of the main draw for it, and the main buff that it gives you is movement speed, which allows you, better positioning a lot of times, getting around the map quicker, so saving you some time getting from camp to camp. And again, like I said, kiting, hit and run, saving some units, saving your hero, or securing kills that you might have missed if you didn't have the movement speed, is really why you want to go for that aura, and possibly hero surrounds or unit surrounds. But so yeah, it's not, I'm not gonna say that Unholy Aura is bad or even Death Coil is bad. It's just they play out differently. I think the ceiling for Carrion Swarm is a little bit higher, just because once you get to level 3, the damage output is really pretty insane, assuming you can hit multiple targets. So and again, one-shotting Wisp is a very tempting prospect. Now, killing 4 or 5 Wisps, would you rather do that, or would you rather just save it for archers? Yeah, it really depends. If the opponent really doesn't have a bunch of archers, but instead has like Mass Dryads, well then obviously you're going to be a little bit handicapped in terms of how strong your Dreadlord is with that spell. So I guess that's another reason why you might want to go for this Tower Rush instead of an expansion when you go for a Dreadlord, is because the elf can, and probably often would just go for Mass Dryads. Like they may try to go for bears or something like that, but against Carrion Swarm, I think just Mass Dryads would be the sort of the intuitive move. Again, against ghouls, Dryads do fairly well. When you don't have a bunch of fiends, I mean, there's just not that same threat to the Dryads, and ghouls without Ghoul Frenzy, and without Unholy Aura, and without, Death Coil to heal, I think they just get kited relentlessly by the Dryads. So, especially like Phantom Knives and or Shadow Strike, both of those, if he picks up a Panda, Drunken Haze and or Breath of Fire, and then Drunken Haze, possibly a combo with it, if he gets level 2, 3, whatever. So yeah, that's probably, that might have been what Jake was thinking. Like, okay, I don't want to get into a spot where it's like I'm just getting kited and I've got a bunch of like weak tier 1 ghouls. That's the thing with the ghouls. Like, if Ghoul Frenzy was a tier 2 upgrade, would it be broken? I don't think it would be. You look at some of the other upgrades that like tier 1 melee units get specifically. Footmen can get Defend. Grunts, and Defend's a tier 1 upgrade, by the way, but Grunts can get Berserker Strength at tier 2, so they get like 100 extra hit points and 3 extra base damage, I think is what the upgrade is. And yeah, I guess you could look at like the Archer range upgrade, and then the Huntress Owl Sentinel upgrade, or they moved the bounce, the glaive bounce or whatever, I don't know what it's called, but the extra bounce on the Huntress attacks, that upgrade, they moved it from tier 3 to tier 2, and I don't think that was broken. You don't really see Huntresses getting massive play as far as that goes just because of that. And so, is that on par with the Ghoul Frenzy upgrade? Maybe not, but I mean, if that was the issue, you might could adjust the stats buff for Ghoul Frenzy, because the way it works out in my eyes is like, by the time you get to Ghoul Frenzy, ghouls as a unit are just outclassed by pretty much everything else. All the counters to ghouls, or a lot of the counters to ghouls show up in tier 2, and they're really hard counters to ghouls are sort of well underway once you get to tier 3. So, and you don't even really have to specifically counter ghouls if you just have like AoE heroes, which are pretty common. A Naga, a Panda, a Tauren Chieftain, high-level Alchemist. There's various heroes with AoE abilities. Ghouls just can't stand in there, and they just can't fight that. I mean, I guess if you like spam heal scrolls or something like that, but honestly, they just get beat down so badly because they have low hit points, and without Ghoul Frenzy, they're slow. If you have Unholy Aura, you sort of mitigate that, but again, they're still just like weaker footmen basically. So yeah. Meanwhile, you've got footmen over there who, besides just being better stats wise, for a slightly more gold cost, 135 gold versus 120 gold. They can get defend all the way, as early as tier 1 if they want to. If they don't want to, they don't have to get defend, obviously. Um, but yeah, they can get defend, and defend does, in certain circumstances, is incredibly efficient and effective, which you could argue the same for Ghoul Frenzy. Like I said, by the time you can get Ghoul Frenzy, you really don't even want to be running around with ghouls, in my opinion. I mean, generally, certainly there are some circumstances where you can still pull it off, but just generally, they're not super versatile. And if it was tier 2, would it be overpowered? I don't. You still, there's still ghouls that you're running around with, so it's like, a lot of stuff that counters ghouls. It doesn't matter if they move really fast. Some stuff is gonna struggle to counter them if they get that speed upgrade from Ghoul Frenzy, but a lot of things like just Mass Wind Riders or something, high level Shockwave, high level Breath of Fire, that stuff. It doesn't exactly matter if you need to stand and fight. The extra speed is not gonna save you from those high level AOE spells and stuff. So it doesn't really. If your ghouls die, then their speed doesn't matter because they're dead. Um, so yeah, now getting in and out of those spots and maybe avoiding those things, yeah. But I mean, if you're just dancing around, that means you're not doing damage, arguably. So they're still bad at trying to run into bases generally, if they have any kind of tower presence or anything like that. So it is what it is. I mean, I don't think they're ever going to change Ghoul Frenzy as far as it seems now. I mean, that they made all those changes in one of the last few patches, and they didn't mess with Ghoul Frenzy. So it's like, I doubt they're going to all of a sudden be like, oh well, yeah, Ghoul Frenzy, doesn't make as much sense in tier 3. How much would it affect the balance if it was tier 2? It's anybody's guess. I would say not really a huge deal. I think maybe they would be a little bit more. You would see ghouls pop up in strategies a little bit more frequently. But as far as like being, arguably broken or overpowered compared to just the regular fiend strategy, I don't really see that being the case. The one exception could possibly be Elf. I don't know how dangerous that would be against a lot of the typical Elf strategies, but I think they'd be fine. Honestly, I mean, maybe those timing attacks would be a little bit more dangerous with Ghoul Frenzy. Like you get tier 2 somewhat on similar time frame, and the Elf gets tier 2. And then you just have like, I don't know, 50 food ghouls. Can the Elf deal with that once you get Ghoul Frenzy? I don't know. Probably. I think you could. I guess if you add statues into the mix, dual auras, you might see some dual aura ghouls showing up, and that could be interesting. I know ghouls to Gargs was a thing, but if your army is split between ghouls and Gargs, then the relative impact of a Ghoul Frenzy would be limited. The more guards you have, the less extra damage you get from Ghoul Frenzy. And if you're spending, resources and build time getting that upgrade, that means fewer Gargs at the same timing. So, it would probably make that strategy better to be able to get Ghoul Frenzy. Would it make it overpowered? I don't even know if that's like I don't think that's the in vogue sort of metagame strategy against Elf anymore. I think it's more of just going for like the regular Fiend type builds, maybe a little bit earlier teching versions of it and earlier hero versions, but more or less using Fiends as the core unit of your army and then adding in, statues and or destroyers and or abominations as needed, and then just trying to, micro and, use micro and timing to just make it work instead of, you know, um, instead of the sort of harass style, hit and run, ghoul guard type play that used to be like the common thing. I don't know if elves have just, like, if the patch changes and elf players have just developed strategies that are just too strong against that, or what, but I don't see undead players going that route as much anymore. But again, granted, I mostly only see like happy replays, um, so it's not like I'm watching like all the undead pros or whatever. So yeah, it's like, who knows? But yeah, I thought this replay was pretty good. Quick game, fun stuff to see a tower rush pulled off against a 200 APM elf player. Darky, what was his name? Darky83. I don't really recognize that name. I'd be curious what his stats were. I guess there's like a third party way to check stats, which seems really goofy for me to say that. But I need the guy's like number too. That's annoying. Oh, okay, there it is. I guess it shows on the replay what the guy's number for his account is. 2937. So yeah, now I've got to go to like a third-party website and search for somebody's account just to look at their stats. What? So this guy's not even found. So what am I doing wrong here? 2937. I typed it in correctly. What happened? Jeez. Well, my account works. Was this on East? Did I type the name in wrong? 2937. Damn. Okay, here we go. Oh, maybe it was case sensitive. Wow, this guy's percentages aren't so great, actually. He's only 161 total games and 161 total wins and 87 losses here. So that's only like 65% according to 64.9% according to this. His elf stats are a little better at 139.65, pulling him to 68.1%, but still, for somebody with this is on Europe. Was this a game on Europe? That's interesting. But yeah, as far as like an elf with 200 APM, I would have thought his stats in this Reforged ladder would have been much better than that, but I don't know. He only has been playing solo, well, seemingly. So he's got about 159 wins in solo, 85 losses. I don't know what level that puts him at. It just seems to me the games, a lot of the games, I have played a lot of like different game types, so that maybe is clouding my assessment. But it seems like the opponents aren't very, the ladder is full of players that are, sort of, average to below average. Maybe once you get over a certain point, it starts to, match you up with harder players. That's the idea generally. Though just in this Reforged, I just think there's been a whole sort of resurgence of players, which, puts the ladder, sort of, there's a lot more people that are just, not as good. So, but yeah, some of that is based on like 44 random team games and free-for-all games and 2-on-2 AT games, which can also now match people who are searching random team, which is ridiculous. in my opinion. But yeah, this guy's stats don't look all that, all that great as far as it goes. But his execution seemed fine to me. As APM was up there. It's just that he got sort of out strategized, I would say, honestly, there. So yeah, bravo, Jake. Well done. And if you, hopefully you guys like this the audio and were entertained and informed potentially, as far as from the elf perspective. Ways to counter this. Obviously, if you get another Ancient War, you probably need it more centrally positioned in your base. I mean, obviously, assuming the enemy's going to tower rush you is a bit of a weird thing to do, especially if you see a Dreadlord. Really seeing any hero, honestly, is seeing a tower rush coming against Elf. I don't know that I've seen that too many times. I know I've tried it before. I've had some success doing it before to Elves. Trying to think if I think when I usually did it, I would do a Death Knight though. But anyways, all that stuff aside, the guy had some scouting lists out there. He saw the acolytes and the ghouls going towards top right. Maybe that was like a little bit of a moment of confusion where he thought that Jake was just going to expand. I think the elf was already building an Ancient War near his shop, so it was sort of already committed sort of to that idea, that placement. Throwing out a couple more Ancients of War in your base sort of before or as the Ziggurats start building is one way to try to counter this, because if you finish some Ancients of War as the towers are finishing, it's almost like you have like a bear level unit. You can uproot it and it's a lot of normal damage, a lot of hit points, it can heal itself, but it's relatively slow. If the Ancient of War is rooted, it has fortified armor, which is great against towers, but it also means if you're not in range, that you're not doing the damage that you want to be doing. So yeah, it's about getting close enough to hit with the Ancients of War, because that damage is significant. It's normal damage, which is actually really good against fortified targets, aka Ziggurats, Spirit Towers, and Ruben Towers. So yeah, it's one way to leverage it's about leveraging your resources quickly enough to respond. If you have to wait for a second hero at your altar, that's a little bit annoying. If you have to get a tavern hero and walk him all the way from the center of the map, again, all that stuff adds up. So it's like, your archers, are your archers popping out in your base, or are they popping out like near the mercenary camp and having to run back to your base? All these things, Ancients of War, are they in range to swing and hit anything? If they're building stuff, they don't get to hit stuff. They're not attacking while they're building, like training archers. So, but if they are there, can you, are your Ancients of War able to be, hitting the opponents? The Tree of Life, or the Tree of Ages, as it were, would you uproot it and move it close to the towers and of the Ziggurats and maybe counter them that way? Knowing the outcome that the elf lost, you might say, well, the elf has to do everything he can to get those towers down, or else he's going to lose. So, when you're looking at that, you might say, well, the gold, mining, 200 gold, or having, the Tree of Ages, hitting for like 45, 50 damage immediately once the Ziggurats start to build, or, shortly after they start to build. That could have been, it's a very unorthodox response, perhaps, to that type of build, that type of tower rush timing, but it, on paper, or, in my head, it doesn't seem too crazy. I mean, it's like, you're just immediately adding, an extra, I don't know, 30 to 40 or whatever the DPS is, a bunch of normal DPS, and or like a unit that has stats similar to a bear or something like that. Tons of hit points on the Tree of Ages. So yeah, you're not going to be mining if you uproot the Tree of Ages. Obviously, So that could end up biting you, in like 2 minutes later or something like that. But in the immediate, getting the towers down, like if you looked at Jake's base, he didn't take to tier 2 or anything. So once the ghouls were dead, if the towers are gone, Jake, he might be able to come back at you with like another 4 ghouls or 5 ghouls or maybe 6 ghouls in a bit. But it's like at that point, is he going to rebuild those? Is he going to rebuild acolytes? Is he going to try to tower again? Is he going to have the resources to do that? I think he's going to maybe run out of lumber at some point doing that, maybe, or he's going to have to leave ghouls back to harvest lumber. He's going to be struggling with to, build more acolytes. That's going to cost gold. And then is he going to run out of mana? Because Elf has Moonwells. The undead doesn't have like clarity potions to get his mana back. So if the Dreadlord runs out of mana at any point, yeah, he's going to regenerate mana at a regular pace. But once his mana is below, let's say below 100, or let's say below like 70, 80, you're not really worried about Carrion Swarm for a while. And then if it's below 50, you're really not worried about Carrion Swarm for a while. So yeah, that becomes a bit of an issue as well for the undead who, like I said, if he's level 3, probably has put 2 points into Carrion Swarm, which means he doesn't have level 2 Vampiric Aura. So, obviously, the potential damage from level 2 Carrion Swarm is huge. So I'm not saying to go Vampiric Aura. I'm just saying when the mana is out, the threat is not the same because a lot of DPS is coming from Carrion Swarm. So, but yeah, that's a pretty obvious point. A little bit of a subtle one. Some players aren't really going to be paying that close of attention to the mana of the opponent, all throughout. But that is a relevant consideration. If you feel demoralized, well, then you say, oh well, his hero doesn't have any mana left, so it's really just his hero and tier 1 ghouls, and he hasn't teched, so you can sort of play accordingly. But yeah, like I said, from the elf perspective, maybe not expanding, or sorry, maybe not tagging quite as quick, or if you're going to take that quick, getting a hero at tier 2. Maybe a panda to put those ghouls down quicker. If you had like 1 or 2 huntresses, that's a little bit of a different scenario against ghouls. Hippogriff Riders, if you can, obviously the timing was really too quick to get Hippogriff Riders, but if you can't get Hippogriff Riders, obviously that poses a bit of a challenge for tier 1 undead. If they don't have towers up, even if they do have towers up, you can probably kite a bit and just avoid the towers. So yeah, that's sort of the rundown of this strategy. I haven't done it extensively. I've tried it before against Elf with mixed success. Again, it sort of depends on the map. If it's a 4-player map, again, it's a little trickier because you have to scout all the spawns, and certain maps obviously creep differently. This map, that Ancient War creep pattern, was very aggressive in my opinion, but it's very common as well. So it's there are more cautious creep patterns. I don't know if creeping the Goblin Merchant is any less risky. Honestly, you can't use. There's no lightning shield, so you're not able to rely on that as a weapon, which means your DPS is going to be fairly limited. And also the item drop is probably not as good. You don't have access to mercenaries at the Goblin Merchant, so that's probably, again, not as appealing. When you can get a Troll Shadow Priest that can heal, and then a Berserker that's, similar stats to like a Fiend or a Rifleman or something, then, instantly, that's a pretty powerful, both of those can sort of, have big impacts on the game. Or, if they get sniped off really quick, obviously not. It's not going to be as big of a deal as good, of course, but yeah, that's about the case with any unit. So yeah, if you like the replay, give it a thumbs up or whatever. And if you have a request, shoot me a message, comment on the video. You know. And until next time, this is ScryMind signing out.